These are my eucalyptus. Need to cut these back. And look at this society garlic. Is it not the cutest? This grouping here isn't meant to be like this. I moved them over here real quick one day when I was moving things, and I just haven't wanted to come back out other than water real quick. I just planted these in the ground, you know, and it's tough. They're surviving, that's for sure, but it's tough to get stuff in the ground. My arborvitae, are you proud of me? They're in front of each window for screening. Hopefully they'll get big enough to screen so I could at least look at birds. Yeah, I'd like to disperse this back to sort of where it went, but I had to put this in. There used to be a tree there, and I'll show you. Oops, I should back out a little bit. Used to be a tree there, and I'll show you what that looked like. That's one of the limbs of it, but I can't plant in there, and I can't plant up there in that corner. I tried to this first too, and there's a big tree root up there as well. These are just some of the arms sitting around. I kind of had this grouping like that, you know, but then I had to rush those up there, and they haven't moved. Isn't that precious? Yeah. My coffee's brewing. There's a purslane. I deadheaded. I'm so proud of myself when I deadhead. And then another lantana that I planted in the ground. A couple, I think these are actually proven winners. Very luscious. All right. Good morning. Sure my hat's on, right? Good morning. I went over to look at the grapes, and the leaves are just so speckled, and you know, I turned them over, and the whiteflies are actually sitting there. How often do they actually sit there? So it's early in the morning, and 55, so they're like, and so, you know, I real quick grabbed this up, but the neem oil. Could have been insecticidal super soap, I don't care. It won't do any good to do just the grapes, because I think they're over on the potatoes as well. Once they leave there, they're gonna go somewhere else. Tomatoes, maybe. I do struggle with whiteflies. So much so I wanted to give up last year. I wanted to give up on the grapes because their leaves get beat up. But I have fruit on them. For me, it's almost, and this may be true for you, it feels like a rush for time. A rush to get the fruits off the vines before something eats them. What was it yesterday that dropped off of the grapes? I believe it was a stink bug. I'll look that up. It was a green bug in that weird stink bug shape, but it was bright green. But you know, we have that thing that we have to do where we have to make sure we're not killing beneficials. I may have mentioned this to you. I think I accidentally killed the beneficial, well, probably a lot, but I accidentally deliberately killed a specific one. I didn't realize it was a lacewing. It was so pretty too, but I thought it was deadly. Well, I don't kill those anymore. And then there's and there's something called an assassin bug that showed up last year. He's usually around the fruit trees, and there's only one, maybe two, but generally one, and he's a beneficial. But he's not real beneficial to people, so don't mess with him, because he will sting or bite or whatever it is they do, and it will hurt. I read. Sometimes when I film in the morning, I show you footage from the day before and the afternoon before. If I film in the morning, just a second, I'm going to scratch, and I hope it doesn't. I'm struggling with the placement of my microphone. It was fine, and now it's not. Did I change subjects? Let's get back to it. So sometimes in the morning, I'll say good morning, or we'll share coffee, and I'll show you some clips of what I did the afternoon before, especially if I happen to talk about them. Well, yesterday afternoon, I harvested some potatoes. I know. I hear you. I know you're sending out congrats for my big announcement on my watermelon. Now, that's not to say I'm not going to lose them, because I did lose a couple last year. They split. But generally, I got them. That's not true. I got a couple of them too early. No, it was hit or miss. But I got a couple that were perfect, and I hope to do better this year. Not worse. As far as my decision making on when to select them. The potatoes have been growing for 100 and so many days, 102 days. And I reread yesterday that the average to maturity or to harvest is 90 to 100 days. The tops haven't died off, and I had been watering them. I thought I hadn't, but I had turned the irrigation on to them. So they were moist, and so, you know, they look a little peaked, but sometimes I'm attributing that to something I'm doing. But I did notice that just a couple stems had died off, and I thought, well, I had seen videos where people dug around in, just pulled out a few potatoes at the bottom of a dead stalk or whatever, and I, as you know, one had already surfaced. Red Norland potato. So I decided to start digging around to see what I could find. And then I'd seen another video where some people were pulling them up by the roots and these little potatoes were dangling. So I pulled a few up by the roots that were, they looked dead, while the others in the smart pots or the grow bags looked alive. I didn't have any little potatoes hanging, so I searched around, and ultimately I had one of the 4 grow bags with potatoes was in a square milk crate smart pot. That one's tended to dry out, so I emptied it. And I dug around and got a few potatoes. They were Yukon Gold, and then I emptied it, and I found the dirt in the very bottom to be very dry. It had not been reaching the bottom. I'm disturbed by that. As far as, I don't know what to think about this moving forward. The water was absolutely inconsistent inside the bag. The top was wet, wet enough. The middle was moist and one side was dry. Just doesn't make sense, especially when I'm using drip irrigation in a circle or I sit in water. That water should be soaking down. Not sure what to think about that going forward. Anyway, I harvested potatoes, and I'll slide that little clip above or inside out of one bag and a few out of another. So I know I need to give these more time, and I will. I did have one that was rotten. So let me ask you this. What happens to the seed potato that one puts in? Where does that go? Somehow I can't work it out. The seed potato becomes the root, but what happens to the body of it? Does it get mushy? Does it get yucky? I don't know. Nothing really new to report in the garden this morning. I'm pretty sure the sunflowers are taller, but once they pass the wall, I don't know, There's no landmark, there's no frame of reference to say, oh, look, it's grown. They just keep going. Daylilies are daylilying. They make me very happy. I really do love the Stella de Oro. I've seen those in commercial plantings a lot. I lived in Boise for a while, a couple years. I worked there in Idaho. I'm sure you know that, but they used Stella de Oro in their commercial plantings, daylilies. Man, they were beautiful, just beautiful. How about you guys? Have you lived anywhere else other than where you're living now? I've lived in a lot of places, and I think about various aspects of them, and I'm sort of a person who can't wait to leave the last place I was, but it's just I have wanderlust. I often look back, too, and think, well, maybe I'd like to live there again, or there again, or there again. I suppose watching Laura in Ontario, Oregon, which is really hop, skip, and a jump from Boise, not even an hour. And I've driven through many times on my way to the West Coast, Washington State. But I think about Boise a lot, sometimes too. But in this case, it's the Stella de Oro daylilies. I think about, I lived in Nebraska, and I think about when I planted shrub roses there. And DC, I planted impatiens in my backyard in a really shady area, and it was my first real planting in the ground of anything. I don't think I'd ever, at that time, planted anything in the ground. I was very young. Well, I wasn't really young, but my daughter was really young. She was like 2, and I was in my late 20s. And my gosh, they grew. And I've never been able to achieve that since. Oh, I'd never seen impatiens do that. It's beautiful, beautiful. So certain places I've lived, Wyoming. I was living in a small house, and it had yellow trim on it, and I wanted to plant climbing roses, and so we bought yellow climbing roses, and they were climbing so beautifully. Oh, and blooming when I left. Growing up overseas, we didn't plant because we lived in a company housing, the oil company that I told you about yesterday. But there was a lot growing. Grapes, I think, grew on some fences, and I used to eat from those, the wild grapes. And then we had a tall tree that had what we called a seed grape. I don't know how to explain this. I don't even really know the name of them, but it would have been tropical. It would have been a Caribbean sort of thing, because I grew up on the Caribbean coast. Grew up until I was 11. These tall trees, we would climb them, and then we would climb them to the top of the houses. All our houses at that time in that housing were flat in the 50s, 60s. So we would harvest these grapes, but they were delicious, delicious. They weren't like these grapes, and if I can, I'll figure out what that fruit was. And they had other fruits down there too. Something called mimones, which was a small round green fruit, and then you took that hard peel off, and inside was a huge seed, but it was covered with a wonderful orange. If I had to think about the taste, it'd be like tang. It's sort of not a citrus taste, but that kind of sweet, orangey. Alaska, I lived in a rented house there. I lived there for 3 years. A lot of this is the military. I don't think we planted. I don't think I had a single container there of anything. But let me tell you, in Alaska, they can grow. You know that. You've seen. When one goes to the state fair, they've got these massive, massive pumpkins because of the long growing days. And downtown Anchorage it's a beautiful city, and at the time the mayor had a lot of pride in the city, and he required everybody else to be proud of it. He had some restrictions on what garbage people could be parking in front of their homes, and nothing could be on blocks, nothing could be abandoned, but downtown. They have hanging baskets, they probably still do, hanging baskets of the most beautiful flowers, probably grown in the hothouse, maybe at the university or maybe for the city. Massive, massive baskets. You can just imagine how big those things were, hanging from lights and things. Beautiful. But I didn't grow a single thing, nope. And in Washington State, I remember planting Leland cypress both times. I've lived in Washington 3 different times. 4? So the 2 times I owned homes, I planted Leland cypress, and just to watch those things grow so majestically. Now, I did have a Leland cypress here in a container. I had bought it as a little quart thing at the store. I did love them so much. And when I moved out from Virginia, I brought it in the car, and it's just a tiny thing, and it grew quite lovely. And I'll show you a little clip of it. But I don't know what the right word is when one voluntarily just ends the life of a beautiful plant. I'm gonna not get emotional about it. I had started reading that it really had nowhere to go. It was those are at least 25 feet tall, and there were going to be some other issues with it going forward. I didn't see them yet, but I knew that it was time to, and it was so beautiful. Relocate it somewhere. I don't think anybody here has Leland cypress. I may not leave that one in the video because it's not one of my happiest times. I've planted them in Washington State, and they grew so big, but they really do need room. I went back. Have you ever done this? I went back to the house I lived in from 96 to 2003 where I had planted a lot in the backyard. I planted 2 Leland cypress, and they are the biggest trees in that neighborhood now. I mean, you can just drive up to it and you can see this massive tree just everywhere. Oh, pretty big. Let's do a daylily check-in this morning. Just get some happy brightness. Oh my goodness. It's love, 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 love. Those are in a container. Do you have containers where you don't know what's in them? Yeah, those popped out this year. I'd forgotten I had them. Still don't remember putting them in. And these daylilies. Forgive the BT powder on the nasturtium. It's just what I need to do. And then this little one, I think I had just got this year. And I'd have to go look at the packages. That light yellow. Cute little yellow ones. And this side's gonna start blooming soon. It gets a little more shade. There's a few in there that have been shaded by the sunflowers, which is a good reason to cut the lower leaves off. Let's all look at the bird poop. My goodness, you guys. Eating so much. Here, back to my happy place. Look at you. Here's a little watermelon check. One of them. That might be the same one I was showing you yesterday. And a melon check. There's 1, 2, probably 3. More coreopsis blooming. The moonlight time. And the sun is shining on the photinia. Yay. Sweet little roses doing their thing. The shrubs are in bloom. Look at those. Oh, I love those. Or carpet roses, I guess, is more accurate. Look how many are bunching up there. I love it. Oh, they're so beautiful. Thank you for joining me for coffee this morning. Talk to you soon. Bye.